Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome to the stage Mr. Ron Stallworth.
This has been a very pleasant return to the city, the state that I called home for 30 years. The city and state where I helped get the gang unit started. That still exists to this day. We began in 1989, called the Solitary Gang Project. It was my brainchild, and today you call it, I believe, the Metro Gang Unit. It's very pleasant to know that that's still in operation, and I hope they still are doing good things. I had a very wonderful 20-year career here. Most of my 20 years anyway were wonderful. I had a very memorable 20-year career with the Utah Department of Public Safety. I was recruited from the state of Wyoming to come here back in 1986 to work undercover narcotics, and about 3 years or so down the line, I got involved working gangs, and that's where I spent pretty much the remainder of my career. And I had a wonderful time interacting with a lot of you out there on this issue. So I hope conditions have improved in that regard for the state of Utah, and especially for Salt Lake City, Ogden, and Davis County areas. But you didn't come to hear about gangs. You came to hear about Black Klansmen. It all began in 1978, October, when I was sitting in my office reading the newspapers. We read the newspapers every day to see what was going on in our city that may be of interest to us from a criminal intelligence standpoint. And I'm sitting there, open the classifieds, scanning the classifieds, not looking for anything in particular, when something caught my eye. Ku Klux Klan. For information, contact, and there was a P.O. box. Now, those of you who worked with me when I was here, you know that I was kind of a wild and crazy guy. I figured, what the hell? I wrote a letter to the P.O. box, and this is what I said. I hate niggers, spics, chinks, Jews, Japs, and anybody else that isn't pure Aryan white like I am. And then I did something that could have been was stupid and could have been a very bad mistake in this investigation. I signed my real name. Now, you ask, why did you do that? And the only thing that I will stand by is that I had a brain cramp that day. I was a trained undercover investigator. I had almost 4 years in undercover work up to that point. I knew better. I have no justification for why I did it other than I did. But as it turns out, that wasn't as big a mistake as I thought it was. And I'll explain that in a minute. So I sealed the letter. I included the undercover phone line. It was an untraceable line back then. I included the undercover phone line, sealed the envelope, dropped it in the mail, forgot about it. About a week later, I get a phone call on the undercover phone line. Hello? This is Ken Odell, chapter president of the New Colorado Springs chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. And I got your letter. You had some interesting things to say. Why do you want to join the Klan? Now, how many black people in America have ever been asked, why do you want to join the Klan? First, I was taken aback by the fact that he said he asked for Ron Stallworth. That's when I realized that I had made a mistake in writing that letter. No turning back now. So I thought for a minute, and that's when I literally got into serious undercover mode, because I had to come up with a response real quick to that question. So what I did, I responded by repeating what I said in the letter. Then I spiced it up a little bit. I said, my sister is dating a nigger. And every time he puts his filthy black hands on her pure white body, it makes me cringe. I want to do something to stop this abuse of the white race. His response to me was, "You're just the kind of person we're looking for. When can we meet?" And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the start of the Black Klansman investigation. It lasted 7.5 months of undercover work, an additional 2 months of report coming into me from various areas. And we did some interesting things. Now, you may have noticed I have used the so-called N-word a couple of times. I'll probably use it a few more times. I don't filter myself. When I worked here, I didn't allow myself to be filtered. And now that I'm free of belonging to any institution, I damn sure don't allow myself to be filtered. But I say the word outright for this reason. With a show of hands, how many of you have ever been called the N-word in your life or heard someone called the N-word? With a show of hands. You all are liars. How many of you have ever heard someone say, "Hey, you filthy, dirty, black N-word person"? You haven't. You know you haven't. We have become so conditioned to avoiding that word, so sensitive to it, that we now have this little soft tippy-toe dance around it, N-word. For those of you who don't remember how that came into being, it happened around 1994 during the O.J. Simpson trial, when Mark Furman, the LA detective who said he had never used that word in his life, when he got caught on audio saying it repeatedly. And the press, in trying to report that word, or report that to the newspapers, came up with this term, N-word, rather than say nigga. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot soften that word and its meaning. There is no such word to compare to nigger in the lexicon of the English alphabet, okay? The English vocabulary. It is a horrendous word. It was used for generations to dehumanize people who look like me, who were blessed with this beautiful skin color, okay? It was used to dehumanize us as a people, to delegitimize us as a race, and there is no softening of that word. I refuse to cater to it. So I will occasionally throw out the N-word. I'll occasionally throw it out in its pure, ugly, vile form so that you get the full impact of it. As I did growing up in El Paso, got into fights 3 times, got kicked out of school 3 times because somebody called me nigger. And when I reported to my mama that I got kicked out of school, she didn't chastise me. She just said one thing: "Boy, did you whip his ass." I lied 3 times and said, yeah. I remember, though, asking my mother, "Well, Mom, he was bigger than me." She said, "I don't care if he is bigger. If he's bigger, you find the nearest brick and you knock him upside the head. But you make him respect you. Don't you let anyone call you that word, because you're not a nigger. You're not." Now, you may cringe in horror at that tale of my mother, but that was a different time, okay? That was a different time. A lot of us in the black community were raised that way. After getting kicked out the 3rd time, the people that I had fights with never called me that term again. We had to fight for our respect as a people. So don't try to soften the term, ladies and gentlemen. Call it for what it is. And don't be afraid to have a conversation with people about that word. Hi, Liz. Don't be afraid to have a conversation with people about it. You should be able to sit there, black folk, white folk, Hispanic, whoever, whatever, and have a discussion about race, about that word in particular. That's the only way we're going to confront it. Because we're not going to eliminate it. It's been around for over 400 years. You saw Spike the other night. He made reference to our 400-year history in this country. So that is my little spiel on the so-called N-word. So after I told him about my sister and the black hands and her pure white body, they were interested in meeting with me. But obviously I couldn't go to a meeting again. So what I did was I stalled for time. I bought a week's worth of time, and I made arrangements to go meet them a week later. And in that moment, in that period, what I did was I went to the narcotic office, which was just across the hall from mine, and I asked for the use of a particular officer. In my book, he's Chuck. In the film, he's Adam Driver. His character's name is Flip Zimmerman. Now, I described Chuck over the phone to the Klan people. He's about my height, about my weight, and I knew how he came to work every day. He generally wore a red plaid shirt. Not every day, but most of the time. So I described Chuck to them as me, so that they would know who Ron Stallworth was when he showed up. And I went to get the use of Chuck from the lieutenant in charge. The lieutenant hit me with this. He said, "It'll never work." So what do you mean? He said, "They will know when Chuck walks in the door pretending to be you. The minute he opens his mouth, they will know the difference between the white man who's standing there in front of them and the black voice on the phone." My response to him was, "What does a black man sound like?" I'm going to ask you all, what does a black person sound like in comparison to a white person? Anybody want to take a stab at that? And if you do, I'm going to shoot you down real quick. The lieutenant stared at me for the longest time. Finally, exasperated, he said, "Well, I'm not going to waste one of my good undercovers for a bunch of nonsense with men running around in white sheets. You can't have it." Okay. Now, police departments are paramilitary organizations. We have a rank structure. In the Colorado Springs Police Department, we have patrolmen at the bottom, sergeants above that, lieutenants above that, captain above that, deputy chief, and then the sixth level was the chief of police himself. I went to my sergeant. I told the sergeant what the lieutenant said. The sergeant asked me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to take it directly to the chief, bypass all these other sons of bitches." And he said, "Let's go." We marched up to the chief's office. I told the chief about my conversation on the phone. I told the chief what I had done, what I wanted to do. The chief said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need the use of Chuck to pose as me for face-to-face meetings. I'll be the voice on the phone controlling all this. And I need at least 2 surveillance officers to provide him with security." Chief got on the phone, contacted the lieutenant, told the lieutenant, "Give Stallworth whatever he needs." The lieutenant is about 85 today. He probably still hates my guts, and I hate his equally back. But we got permission to move this investigation forward. When the week came around, I wired Chuck up. I told him what I had said on the phone. I said, "What I need from you is to go in there to this meeting, and I need for you to find out anything and everything you can about this group, how many of them there are, what are their aims, what's their intent. Get any literature that you can, pamphlets, newspapers, anything they might have, and we'll go from there." We wired him up, we sent him out, and he was taken to this bar near Fort Carson, Colorado. And he met Ken Odell and about 4 other Klansmen. They were soldiers. They were GIs. And Ken proceeded to tell them that he had joined the Klan because his wife had been brutally raped by a nigger. I checked all the police files. Nothing ever like that was reported, okay? His wife, by the way, interestingly enough, the Klan doesn't like Hispanics. Ken was from San Antonio, Texas, and his wife was Hispanic, okay? So we found out that what they wanted to do was their immediate aim was to get as many people robed, wearing white robes and hoods, get as many people robed as they possibly could, because they wanted to have a grand march down Nevada Avenue in the heart of downtown. Nevada Avenue is like State Street here. And they wanted 100 robed Klansmen as a show of force and intimidation to march down Nevada Avenue and announce their presence in the community and to honor the Grand Wizard, David Duke. They never pulled that off. I was able to identify over the course of my investigation 14 Klan members, most of them military. But that was their immediate goal. The other thing that they wanted to do, they wanted to bomb the 2 gay bars that we had. Now, when I told the FBI this, that's when they perked up and got interested in my investigation. Why did they want to bomb the gay bars? It's very simple. They were gay. That's the only reason. They never pulled that off. In the movie, if you've seen the movie, how many have seen the movie? Good. If you've seen the movie, you see where there was a bombing plot that they tried to execute at the end, the climax of the film. That was in reference to the discussions I had on the phone with them about bombing the 2 gay bars. It never happened, but they were talking about it. And they had the capability of doing it because a couple of the Klansmen were military-trained ordnance people. They played with explosives as part of their job. They had access to explosives. So they were fully capable of carrying it out. They just didn't. So they wanted to bomb the gay bars. They talked about setting up a Klan watch at the Mexican border. My hometown of El Paso came into play. Because at that time period, David Duke was setting up border watches with Klansmen. He had set one up in the Tijuana area, San Diego, where they were literally patrolling the Mexican border around Tijuana, armed. And they were talking about doing it down where I currently live now in El Paso, where I grew up. And what they wanted to do was have 30-30 and 30-06 scoped rifles and shoot any quote-unquote wetback they caught walking across the Rio Grande. This was David Duke's immigration plan 40 years ago, okay? He was Donald Trump before Donald Trump. And I'm not through with Mr. Trump yet. They never pulled that off, at least not in El Paso. But this is what they were talking about doing on the phone. And then they hit me with this, or they hit Chuck with this. They wanted to burn 4 gigantic crosses in strategic locations, high points in the Colorado Springs area, so that wherever you looked, you would see a burning cross in the distance. The burning cross was to symbolize the fact that the Klan was alive and well and were ready for business. They never pulled that off either. I know because they invited me to participate in 2 of the cross burnings. And I got the information from them, where it would be, what time they were going to plant the cross. And once I got that information, I went to the dispatcher, told the dispatcher, hey, I need extra patrol units on this particular intersection at this particular time, and we need to keep it up for probably 3 or 4 hours. And where there would be 1 police car normally patrolling an area, on the night in question, we had probably 3 or 4 cars. And I know, keep in mind, this was back in the day before cell phones or text messages. So I had 24 hours to wait to find out if my plan was actually going to bear fruit. But when I talked to them 24 hours later and asked, how did it go? I begged out of it because being an undercover cop, I couldn't participate in the crime. So I begged out of it. When I asked them how it went, they said, well, we didn't do it. Well, why not? Well, we drove up there to plant the cross and everything else, and when we got there, we saw a police car coming north, we saw another one going south, we saw one coming east, and we saw one coming west. So we just decided to call it off. Damn. Twice they tried to do that. We pulled the patrol units out like that. They canceled. They planned a third cross burning. And in the planning of the third cross burning, they thought about what happened in the first two, and they just decided, yeah, we're not going to do it. So we prevented 3 cross burnings. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, a cross burning is a domestic act of terrorism. It's been classified as such by the Congress of the United States as far back as the late 1800s. We stopped 3 terroristic acts as a result of this investigation. The other thing we accomplished, we identified 2 top security clearance personnel stationed at NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command. NORAD, if you're not familiar, is a joint American-Canadian venture, a remnant of the Cold War, and they patrol and monitor North American airspace. They're on duty right now for an attack. And I got paid a visit one day in my office by 2 OSI investigators, Office of Special Investigations of the Air Force. They heard about my investigation. They asked to see me and talk to me about it. And then they asked to see my investigative file book with a list of names. When I showed them the names, they ran their finger down it. They stopped. They said, can you take a ride with us? I said, where are we going? They said, just take a ride with us. We can't tell you. Can't tell me. I asked them 3 times. They said, we can't tell you. Just ride with us. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I said, okay, I'm going to go with you. They said, bring your notebook too. So I jump in their car. They get on Interstate 25 heading south. I asked them again, where are we going? Silence, dead silence. Now I'm being freaked out. They drove south on Interstate 25, and it wasn't until I looked up and I saw the sign, the exit sign that said NORAD, that I knew where we were going because they veered right. And they go up the hill and there's Cheyenne Mountain. You had to be Obama to get in Cheyenne Mountain. And here I was, a lowly detective, and they were taking me inside. We go up some back stairs inside the mountain to the building, one of the buildings. They seat me, and in walks a full-bird colonel, identified himself as a deputy commander of NORAD. He laughed at my investigation when I told him the details. Then he asked to see the file book. He ran his finger down, stopped, turned his back to me for security reasons, privacy, and made a phone call. I couldn't hear what he was saying. Hushed tones. He finished, hung the phone up, shook my hand, congratulated me on an investigation on my career, walked out. I asked the investigator, I said, what just happened? They said, you have identified 2 people who currently are on the console monitoring North American airspace. They have top security clearance, and you've identified them in your investigation. I didn't know this. He said the Pentagon, the colonel had made a call to the Pentagon. They viewed these guys as a top security issue, national security issue, by virtue of their job, and they wanted them gone. By the end of business that day, this was around 2 in the afternoon, so by 5 o'clock, they said that these guys would be on a transport headed to, and I quote, the North Pole. Now, I asked the investigators, I said, do we have a base at the North Pole? And they just looked at me and they said, we got one that's pretty damn close. And that's all they said about it. So I figured some top secret facility or something. I don't know, but that's what they told me. And that these guys were going to be positioned out by the end of business. So without knowing it, we had impacted a security issue that the Pentagon deemed worthy enough to take action. This was ultimately the outcome of my investigation. But there were some other interesting moments to it, ladies and gentlemen. For example, one day I called David Duke up. I started talking to David Duke because I didn't get my membership card in a timely fashion. And I was told that I couldn't participate in any cross burnings or any other activities until I had my membership card. I called David Duke up to find out what had happened. And he said, I said, Mr. Duke, this is Ron Stallworth. I'm one of the new chapter members in Colorado Springs, and I want my membership card, but, you know, this is going on. And I can't get involved until I get it. So I could hear him rustling some papers in the background. And he said, oh, here's your application right here. See, when we came back from that initial meeting with Chuck, I sat Chuck down, I snapped his photo, which was required. I filled out the application myself with information pertaining to me. The next day, I got $30 of membership funds from the chief, got a money order, mailed that off with the application, and here we were. He said, I've got your application. There's been an administrative snafu in the office. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to personally process your application, and I'm going to get this card out to you today. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's my clan membership. Signed by David Duke. Signed by David Duke. Yeah, no shit. And here's an interesting part. On the back is their pledge. 6 pledges. Number 5 always caught my attention, and I still crack up about it, because here's what it says. To never discuss any Klan affairs with any plainclothes officers on a state, local, or national level. Every time that sucker talked to me, he was snitching on himself. Okay? So I get my membership card. I also have a certificate of membership that was framed when I worked here at the Department of Public Safety. In my office, it was framed, hung on the wall. And I remember one day the Commissioner of Public Safety paid me a visit. And he's sitting there talking to me, and I noticed his eyes kept wandering above my head to that certificate. Finally, he literally got up and pushed me out of the way and walked right up to it and looked at it. He turned and said, is it appropriate for one of my sergeants to have that hanging on the wall? I said, is it appropriate to have the head of dead animals and dead fish hanging on the wall? He said, I see your point, carry on. So I get my membership card, and in talking to David Duke, one day I decided to ask him a simple question. I said, Mr. Duke, aren't you ever worried about some smart alecky nigger calling you up pretending to be white to learn about the Klan? He said, no, I don't worry about that. I said, why? He says, because I can always tell when I'm talking to a nigger. I said, really, how? He said, take you, for example. He said, I can tell that you are a pure Aryan white man based on how you pronounce the English language. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't understand. He said, take the word R, or the letter R. Pure Aryan whites like you and I, we pronounce it the way it was meant to be pronounced. We say R, R. But a nigger says R, R. He said, whenever you talk to someone on the phone and you're not sure what they are, get them to say that word. It's a dead giveaway that you're talking to one of them. I said, Mr. Duke, I want to thank you for that. David liked to be fawned over, kind of like Donald Trump. He liked people to cater to his ego. He was always called Mr., and I called him Mr. on the phone. I'm playing an undercover role. I said, Mr. Duke, I want to thank you for that. If you hadn't have told me, I wouldn't have known. I said, from now on, when I talk to somebody and I'm not sure, I'm going to do what you said. So from that point on, whenever I called Duke up, I would say, Mr. Duke, this is Ron Stallworth. How are you doing? Mr. Duke, how are the wife and kids? And that sucker never realized he was being made a fool of. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why I say when Dr. King and all the people involved in the civil rights movement were marching to the theme of the movement, We Shall Overcome, I've always said, sooner rather than later, we will in fact overcome, because idiots like that are out there pretending to be superior to the master race. And if a kid who at the time was a high school graduate like me with about 20 college credit hours could con a person like David Duke, who had a master's degree from political science from Louisiana State University, we will in fact overcome the hell out of this. I got a call, by the way, from David Duke 1 week before the movie opened. Don't ask me how he got my number, because I know how. But I'm in Brooklyn with my wife. We're doing publicity. My phone rings. I pick it up. He said, Ron? I said, hi, David. This is David Duke. I said, how you doing? It was like 40 years had never passed. I immediately recognized his voice. He called basically to tell me he respected me, he liked me, he read the book, and he was advising his podcast listeners to go buy the book because I spoke the truth. I've been endorsed by the Grand Wizard. He also said that he liked and respected Spike Lee, and he wanted me to know that. When I told Spike that, Spike said, that's the kiss of death. I don't need it. But we had an hour-long conversation. The first 11 minutes my wife was able to record. And when we hung up, I immediately got on Facebook and I typed some notes in there to myself, like I did when I was a working cop, undercover cop. I typed it while it was fresh in my memory. Essentially, he was concerned. He called me for one reason. He was concerned about how he was going to be portrayed in the movie, because the trailer with Topher Grace playing him had just started to run, and it's not flattering to David. He was concerned about his image. But during the course of our conversation, he insisted he was not a white racist or a white supremacist. I said, David, you endorsed Donald Trump in Charlottesville. He said, well, Trump's not a racist or a supremacist either. I said, yeah, he is. I said, he referred to African countries as shithole nations. I said he referred to Mexicans as rapists, murderers. I said he said that he only wants immigration from white countries like Norway and Sweden. I said, he's a fucking racist. And if Donald Trump thinks Spike Lee was hard on him at the Oscars, he should come talk to me, because I'll really tell that son of a bitch something. Now, I know this is Utah, I know this is a Republican state, and I know some of you voted for it. That's a shame that you will have to live with for the rest of your life. Not me. But he insisted that he and Trump were not like that at all, and whenever I cornered him on something, he'd immediately change the topic. Okay? He said America was founded by Germanic and Irish people like him. I said, no, it wasn't. I said, America was founded and built by slaves, by the Chinese, by the Irish. I said, there's no such thing as pure Aryan white, like he kept repeating. He said, yeah, there is. I said, no. I said, America was founded by rich, white, slave-owning rapist. He said, there's no evidence that Thomas Jefferson did that. I said, yeah, it is. I said, there's DNA evidence that he raped Sally Hemings. He was a slave master. He had sex with her. Her progeny lived to this day. I said, he was a rapist. He changed the subject, didn't want to talk about it. We carried on like that for an hour. He said he didn't like, I asked him, why don't you like Jews? Next to, in the Klan's pantheon of hate, blacks are probably at the top. And then come the Jews. And then you pick whatever minority group you want after that based on where you live in the country and what they're doing. That group will be added to their list. For a while in their history, they hated Catholics because Catholics answered to the Pope. And the Pope was a threat to all things American. They have since softened their views, and Catholics are now accepted in the Klan. God help the Catholic Church. But I asked him why he hated Jews. He said, well, the Jews run Zog. Zog meaning Zionist-occupied government. And people who believe in Zog, the white supremacy movement who believes in Zog, say that Jews control the financial issues in America, they control the entertainment media, they control the political arena, and I'm missing one. Financial, political, entertainment. What? Entertainment, yes, thank you. And because Jews have such power, they are a threat to America, to the vision of the Founding Fathers. He referred to the two screenwriters that won the Oscar with Spike the other night, Charlie Wachtel and David Rabinowitz. He referred to them as two Jewish boys. I said, why did you have to refer to them as Jewish boys, David? Why couldn't you just say that they were men? What does their Jewish faith have to do with anything? He said, well, in the South, we use the term boy all the time, and we don't mean anything by it. I'm sorry, but ladies and gentlemen, you call me a boy, and I'm ready to fight you. Because throughout our history, the term boy, in essence, was a polite way of saying nigger. Okay? Call a grown man a boy. You could be 80, 90-year-old grandfather, and you would always be a boy to the white community. They never allowed you to be a man. We could not be head of our households because we had no control over our households. We had to take orders from the slave master, who could come in at any time, violate the space, take your woman, violate her, and you had to take it. Because if you tried to challenge him, you'd get the bullwhip, might even get castrated, or worse, lynched. We could never be men. We had to be boys. There's a history behind that phrase in reference to black men, calling us boys. It's demeaning. It's disgusting. It's in the same scale as nigger. Don't ever call me a boy. Because I'm ready to kick your ass if necessary. You know? But I asked David that. Boy doesn't mean anything. He said, that's just something we say in the South. And if you ever listen to David talk, David was known for not using the word nigger in public in his speeches and talks and everything else, media appearances. But if you listen close, David said nigra, not negro, nigra. Whenever I hear somebody from the South say negro, I translate that to immediately, they want to say nigger. They're just not being polite and they're not getting it out. And that's David Duke. He didn't use that term in public because he was trying to change the image of the Klan back when I was dealing with him. Okay? He was trying to change the image of the Klan. He wanted to make the Klan more palatable to the American public. He wanted to make the Klan more of a political movement. And as I said, David was trying to accomplish 40 years ago what Donald Trump accomplished 3 years ago. And that's when the office of the presidency. When Donald Trump ran for president, I was listening to all of his stuff. A lot of what Trump was saying, I heard 40 years earlier coming out of the mouth of David Duke, sometimes in conversations with him on the phone. Make America great again? Translate that to mean exactly what they mean. Make America white again. Make America white again. Turn it back to a time when whites dominated the American landscape, where we as blacks had to be subservient to whites, where we couldn't walk down the sidewalk at an approaching white woman. We didn't dare look at her because she might say that we were violating her. And therefore, we could be subject to a beating, castration, maybe even lynched. That's the type of America they want to go back when they talk about make America great again. America first. Donald Trump didn't come up with that. That was a popular slogan of the Klan back in the 1920s. There's an iconic photograph you can find in history books of a march down Pennsylvania Avenue in the 20s with Klan men and Klan women wearing their white robes, and they're holding a banner, a very long banner, and it says, America first. David Duke was talking to me on the phone about America has to renew its greatness, make America great again. We have to do what we can to make sure America is first in line, America first. He was saying those things 40 years ago. You Trump voters, you put David Duke in the White House in the form of Donald Trump. Plain and simple. He perpetrated the biggest con in American history, and now we're living with it. So that was my Klan investigation, ladies and gentlemen. One of the other highlights as I'm closing up, because my wife has given me the choke sign here. That's why I have her in the front seat. She keeps an eye on me, and I love her to death. One of the things that happened in my investigation, you've all heard about the famous photograph scene in the movie. Actually happened. Actually happened. On that day, I was told by the chief of police that he was getting death threats on David Duke. He didn't want anything to happen to David, so he assigned me to be his security, which is something we did in intelligence. He assigned me to be his security to get him safely out of town. And I went to meet David. I had a Polaroid and Instamatic camera with me. I didn't plan on anything. I just wanted to get a picture with the Grand Wizard for my posterity. But I went, I introduced myself to him. We shook hands. He showed me the Klan handshake. Shake hands in the normal fashion. Take these two fingers, put them on the inside wrist, and as you pump the hand, you goose the person with those fingers. It's a creepy feeling. David shook hands with me. He gave me the Klan handshake, and I just did like that. And I told David, I said, my name, I am a detective with the Colorado Springs Police Department. Didn't give him my name. And I said, I don't agree with you politically, philosophically, ideology-wise. I said, but I'm a professional. I would do everything I can to see that you get out of my city alive. He thanked me. Then I said, Mr. Duke, would you mind taking a picture with me? He said, no, not at all. So I had the Grand Dragon, or state leader, on this side, the Grand Wizard, David Duke, on this side, and I did like this. The Grand Dragon thought it was hilarious. David pushed my arm away. He said, I'm sorry I can't be seen in a photo with you like that. I said, I understand, excuse me. So I walked up to Chuck, the white round Stallworth. I walked up to Chuck and told Chuck on the count of 3, snap the photo. So then I went back and I stood with my hands down like this, and I said, 1, 2, 3. Chuck snapped the photo. David bolted away from me to Chuck. I was a split second faster than David. I got the photo. David tried to snatch it out of my hand, and I told him, if you touch me, I will arrest you for assault on a police officer. Don't do it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand the significance of that moment. For our history in this country, we as black people have always been subject to the will of white supremacists, especially the Klan. They controlled every aspect of life in their communities, especially law enforcement. And on this particular occasion, at that precise moment, I was David Duke's worst nightmare. I was a nigger with a badge and a gun, and I had the license to pop a cap in his ass if I wanted to. So David stood and glared at me for the longest time, and finally he turned around, walked over to his followers, and proceeded to give a speech on white supremacy, which I had just shattered. Okay? He was a defeated man. 2 days after that, I called him up. Said, Mr. Duke, sorry I couldn't spend more time with you while you were in Colorado Springs, but I enjoyed meeting you. He said, yeah, I would like to spend more time with you as well. I said, did you enjoy your visit? He said, yes. I said, did anything unusual happen? He said, well, this nigger cop threatened to throw me in prison. I said, really? What happened? He proceeded to tell me everything that happened with the photo incident as if I wasn't there. And I egged him on. I said, you know, that's what's wrong with this country. We have niggers going around thinking that they own everything, and we need to control them. We need to stop them. We need to do this. And he was saying, yes, we do. We need to do it. And he's agreeing with me. My sergeant is sitting in his chair about to fall out laughing so hard. And finally, after I had played with his head a little bit, I said, well, I have to go, Mr. Duke. You take care. He said, you take care too. And then we both cracked up laughing. That was my encounter with the Grand Wizard. My investigation ended, ladies and gentlemen, because I got a call one day from Ken Odell, the chapter president. He was mustering out of the Army, and he wanted local leadership to take over the Klan. He said, we took a vote, and by unanimous decree, they wanted Ron Stallworth to become the chapter president. And when I told the chief that, the chief said, shut it down. And so that's how it ended. I was ordered to destroy the files. I was ordered to basically disappear. And what I did instead, I took those files, marched out of the police department with them under my arms, and took them home. And it's from those files, official police reports, that I wrote Black Klansman.
Everyone, please give Ron Stallworth one more hand. Okay. Now, very quickly, I know everyone's excited.